involvement in political activity that subvert civilian control or that are partisan from the forms that are represent constructive engagement with politics, political awareness, understanding in the advisory process how to better interact with civilians and make for a process that's going to lend itself to creating better strategic outcomes. I would also say that, I've been thinking about this. I'll just put this out there, see what anybody else thinks about it, that we need a new sort of metric for understanding and measuring what political activity is. So I think that in reflecting on this, I think that often what military leaders, and I think you could find examples today of this, think what being apolitical means is it results in, or it's equivalent to, inaction or passivity. But I don't think that's always right. Doing nothing is not necessarily always the apolitical position. That doesn't mean running amok and sort of saying all sorts of crazy things, but it means that sometimes taking action is the way to further or limit the military's political impact on outcomes. And so let me sort of just propose that if we think of being apolitical as minimizing one's impact on domestic debate. So that being apolitical is taking a position that minimizes the military's impact on domestic partisan or policy debate. Sometimes that means making statements that reiterate the institution's core values, that saying, no, I won't stand behind you when you make a campaign speech. Explicitly stating in testimony to Congress during a review of military strategy that you can't yet comment on that because the review is in process. Those are actions. Those are explicit things. But those kinds of actions can help maintain and keep the military out of politics and apolitical. So we need to get rid of this idea that apolitical means always doing nothing.
All right. So shifting gears a little bit as we wrap up. We know that civil-military relations is not a topic that features very prominently in high school civics or in most Intro to American Government classes that undergraduates take. Yet here we are at Marquette, where you teach civil-military relations regularly to undergraduate students. Why is it important for these civilian students, and not just military academy students, but civilian ones, to learn about civil-military relations, even if maybe they might not have careers that directly relate to military policymaking?
It's a great question. First of all, I would say that I have a lot of ROTC students too, and it's important for them to be involved in those discussions as well, because they're learning some pretty narrow things, and it's shocking sometimes the things that they aren't exposed to either. And also just they're being educated in a classroom with other civilians, and that's a good, that kind of exposure is really helpful to them. So I would say it goes both ways. What do I think? What are the benefits? Let me just start with, as a teacher, students really love learning about civil-military relations. When I first say that, sometimes they have no idea what I'm talking about. They just look at me like I'm from another planet. But as soon as we get into some of the debates and issues, it engages them so much. And I think that's because so many political, international, societal, ethical problems are embedded in different ways in aspects of civil-military relations. So it's a microcosm for a lot of different things. You can talk about things like ethics and leadership. You can talk about what is patriotism and, get into philosophical debates about that. You can talk about sociological issues. Why do people join the military? You can talk about sort of wars and the role of the U.S. military in wars and international problems and things like that. And so I think that intellectually, it is a really useful vehicle for really teaching about a wide range of problems in a way that students are naturally engaged with. But I would say that at the end of the day, there's also a real civics role here. It is remarkable how little students know about the U.S. military. I mean, this isn't the only thing students need to learn, and I'm not suggesting that, but it is striking. I had in my American National Security Policy class, I was actually an ROTC student who argued this with me, that wasn't the Secretary of Defense always a military leader? And if not, well, shouldn't they be? That is phenomenal, right? I mean, a basic understanding of the Constitution and the National Security Act of 1947, all of these basic things had no concept of. So by teaching this, you're teaching about the structure of the government and about how this really important institution that absorbs by far the vast majority of discretionary spending in the budget, what it's doing, and teaching people to be engaged in these important questions and issues and to pay attention to them for their lifelong, in their lives, no matter what they do and what occupation they pursue.
And so what's one thing you want all students, military or civilian, to know about civil-military relations?
That's a great question. I would say that the health of those institutions, of the military and the civilian interface, depends on them continuing to understand and pay attention to what the military is doing and the decisions that the civilian leadership is making in war. And that is the most important reason to care about it, because it's going to affect outcomes that are going to have ramifications for American society and for many of their lives down the road.
Well, Dr. Risa Brooks, thank you so much for joining us and for your hospitality, having us out to Marquette. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining us today on Thank You for Your Service. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at TYFYS_podcast. And don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, so you'll get our next episode as soon as it's released. And stay tuned for an important announcement very soon about the future of the podcast.
Thank You for Your Service is produced by Ashwarya Kumar, and our publisher is Yi Ning Wang. Special thanks to Dr. Risa Brooks, as well as her undergraduate international security class at Marquette University. We record here at the Harris School of Public Policy at the University of Chicago.
Thank You for Your Service is a production of the University of Chicago Public Policy Podcasts and does not necessarily represent the official positions of the Department of Defense or the U.S. government. I'm Nick Pareso.
And I'm Thomas Krasnation. See you next time.